And welcome to Wild Bill's Media and the Arts podcast. Today we're going to talk about Eister's 30th anniversary remix remastered edition of their self-titled debut. But before we get into talking about the album, I want to give you a little insight on how I become an Iced Earth fan, my love for Iced Earth, and then we'll get into talking about the debut. But my love for Iced Earth goes all the way back to 2001 when I discovered Iced Earth's Horror Show album. I had been seeing ad, this album advertised in a heavy metal magazine called Metal Edge, and it was a full page advertisement or layout or whatever. And I just saw this, and it said Iced Earth Horror Show, and it was just killer looking. And and I was like, man, that is so cool. And back in that time, I was a big horror movie fan anyway, and so that artwork intrigued me. Well, one day, probably late 2001, I'd have to say around about sometime in like September, I was in a music store in North Carolina. I was working on a job there, so I was working out of town. And I come across, the heavy metal section. And so I went down, scrolling down through the metal section. And that's the thing I like about those kind of like small stores like that inside of malls. They all had like their own heavy metal section. And you could, and they would all a lot of times have stuff that you couldn't find in other places. So I scrolled down, found the I section, and there it said Eister's Horror Show. I think they might have had like 4 or 5 different albums by Eister. So I grabbed that one and another CD called Something Wicked This Way Comes. So I purchased the album, Take It Back, and I listened to it. And from the very first note of the album, I was hooked. And I had fell in love with Ice Earth that day. And I listened to this album over and over and over again. Then I listened to the other album, Something Wicked, and I fell in love with that album. And at the time, during this album, they had a lead singer called Matt Barlow. He had been with the band since the third album. And he was also on the album Something Wicked. But I had just loved it because they had like and basically the album was based on the old like Universal horror movies like Dracula. Well, actually Dracula was based more on Bram Stoker's Dracula, but like Wolf and Damien was based on the Omen trilogy. Then they had like a song for Dragon's Child, which is based off the drag swamp thing or whatever it is. It's called Creature of the Black Lagoon, but it's called actually it was based off of Creature from the Black Lagoon, but it was called Dragon's Child. And they had a song for Jack the Ripper, Jekyll and Hyde, uh, Frankenstein, Phantom Opera Ghost, which is based off the Phantom of the Opera. Um, just I think there was a couple more titles they had, and so they were all based off of classic horror movies. So I loved it, and for a long time there, and probably still to this day, it's probably my favorite Iced Earth album. Although there's a couple albums that have come close, like The Glorious Burden and maybe Incorruptible. But I I listened to that album for a while, and then I was somewhere else. I think a little while later, and I had come across two more albums, and one of them was called Dark Saga, and the other one was their self-titled debut. And at the time when I saw the self-titled debut, this was the cover I got. There's actually been several different covers. This right here was the uh, the American release, United States release, and then they had an alternate cover for the European release. And it was a lot more artwork. It had a lot more detail, a lot more colors and everything than the American cover did. And actually, this is the same cover that they used for the remix and remastered 30th anniversary edition of the CD. And I'm not sure if they did a vinyl version of it or not through Century Media. Now, Iced Earth has released a 30th anniversary edition vinyl that you can only get on their website. And it has a different cover, which I think is actually more badass than the original cover, and it's a lot more graphic and a lot more. I just think it fits I think it just fits the album and the artwork a lot, or the album a lot better. But I fell in love with Ice Earth just because they have just this unique sound. They're just kind of an old school like thrash metal band from the late '80s or mid '80s to early '90s, and they just have this, I don't know, just kick ass sound. And they've been around, and most of their career they've been underground, except probably the Glorious Burden was probably the album that started kind of getting them noticed more in the mainstream kind of stuff. Um, but that at that time that Matt Barlow had left the band, and that was when Tim the Ripper Owens had come in. Tim the Ripper Owens replaced Rob Halford and Judas Priest, and when he left Priest, he was doing some solo stuff, and so he joined Iced Earth for a couple albums, and then was out of the band. But they but I just think that Iced Earth is one of those bands that have just been kind of um flew under the radar because they don't get the mainstream audience like most people do. They've never really opened for a real huge band. I mean, they've opened up for like I think was Judas Priest and like I think Megadeth and stuff and some bands like that, but they've never, I don't think, really played huge. They've played Vakken a few. I think they've played Vakken before. Maybe. I'm not sure. I wouldn't hold my. Yeah, they did. They played Vakken before, and so they've actually they've actually made a pretty good. They're more huge overseas than they are in the states. I mean, they're really big overseas in Europe, Germany, and um, Greece and stuff like that. They're a huge band over there. But Iced Earth was actually formed. Iced Earth has had several names over the years, and when they first started out, they were under the moniker Rose, and that they actually started January 20th of 1985 in Tampa, Florida. But actually, the Rose was started in '84, but that group didn't last long. And then they changed their name to Purgatory, and I think they did a um, a demo called Psychotic Dreams at the time. And then a little bit later on, they changed their name in 1988 to Iced Earth. And then in 1989, Iced Earth recorded their demo that got them signed, which was called Enter the Realm. And Enter the Realm at the time, lineup of Gene Adams on vocals, Randall Shawver on lead guitar, Dave Abell on bass, Greg Seymour on drums, and John Schaefer on rhythms, guitar, and vocals. And all the songs off the demo were on the first album except for the title Enter the Realm and Nightmares. And then in 1990, in November of 1990, their self-titled debut, Iced Earth, was released in Europe. And then on February 25th, 1991, their debut was released in the U.S. But it has been, I can't believe, well, because I've been an Iced Earth fan now for 20 years or 19 years. No. Well, yeah, 20 years. It'll be 20 years this year because I discovered them in 2001. So basically, um, so it's been actually 30 years since their debut. And they actually had their album remixed and remastered before. And I can't remember the release date, but I know they had released it before in a box set called Dark Genesis, and they had re-released the demo and that, and I think it was uh, their album. They did Storm Rider, which was their second album, then Burn Offerings was their third album, and then they did a CD of all cover songs called Tribute to the Gods. So that was the first time the debut was remixed and remastered, and it had an alternate cover for that as well. But this time, because I have actually purchased the album, the new the 30th anniversary remix remastered version of the album, and I'm just going to have to tell you, it sounds kick ass. I mean, you could tell the vocals and the bass and the drums are really lifted, and they're really like you can tell that the album has like a new punch to it, and just the way it sounds, it's just so way better sounding than the original recording and the remix and remastered back a few years back. That was in the box set Dark Genesis. I do notice though that the vocals are really, really awesome. I'm just gonna say this, that I know the first album gets a lot of slack because of Gene Adams and his vocal style and how he sung on the first album and everything. But I sit back now and I listen to how his voice has just been brought to the forefront on this album. And without a shadow of a doubt, without any hesitation, he was the right man for the right. He was the right man for the job at the time. And I honestly believe he could have been the lead singer on Storm Rider and pulled it off. But That was the only album he ever sung on Iced Earth, was the debut. I don't know why he left the band, and I'm not getting into all that. But I'm just going to tell you, the actual album has 8 tracks on it, and you have was the title track, Iced Earth, Written on the Walls, which was written by Gene Adams. Colors, Curse the Sky, Life and Death, Solitude, which is an instrumental, Funeral, which is an instrumental, and When the Night Falls. Those are the tracks that are on the album. And I know Colors, Curse the Sky, um, were all on the demo of Enter the Realm. But I have to tell you, if you haven't picked up this album and you're a metal fan, then you need to pick this album up. They're like a thrash metal, kind of old school metal band. You know, some people put them in the category of power metal. I don't know that I would, um, but I guess if you had to label them something, I just call them a good old fashioned heavy metal band. They're not really thrash. They're not really speed. I just call them a metal band, and that's what they are. And they do what they do really well. And but the self-titled debut, man, it just has the remix and remastered version just has um a, a new sound to it and a new thing that just brings that album to life. And and it's kind of dated for the time, but you will definitely understand what I'm talking about if you pick the album up. I know it's available on Amazon. I Surf the merch. You can get the vinyl. You can go to the Century Media website. Let's see. I'm not sure where else you can get it. They're probably gonna have it in stores. I'm pretty sure, but it just sounds killer, man. And with Gene Adams on vocal, there's a section in the song written on the walls where Gene goes, and as I lay here, freezing veins of ice, what will be for me? What will be the price? Can this shadow world's fate? Can't we something survive at all or something like that? But the way he does that in the song, it's just like, I don't know, man. It just so surreal. It's just cool how he does it. And it kind of gives you chills, man. And there's like songs like Iced Earth and Written on the Walls and Curse the Sky that I don't think anybody else could do justice but Gene, because he just has this kind of like sadistic voice in it that just it makes it more I don't know, like in Iced Earth, it just kind of makes it more um scarier, I guess. Maybe is that what word you want to say or whatever. Um it just brings that more of a that kind of element to it. Because that but yeah. There's a guy named Zeus remixed and remastered the album, and he did a really fantastic job on it. Um I think a guy named I forgot the guy who done the artwork now, but he done a really good job with that. Kick ass looking. Um, it's different. Well, the vinyl version anyway. The CD has the original artwork from the debut, the European release anyway, and but the front cover is just it's kick ass on the vinyl. If you happen to pick that up, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But if you haven't picked this album up, go and get it. For a debut album, I think it's killer. I think it rocks. Day, Gene Adam vocal on this album is right for the time. Um, and I love his vocals, and I love the way he sings the songs on this album. I love the music. I love the playing. It's just it was really done. The remix and remastered job makes this album really sound way better than it did back in the day. And they took time and put the money into it and made it sound great. And the album is awesome. I recommend it to a true metal fan to go out and pick it up. And that's pretty much all I could say about this album, other than just, if you love some good old heavy metal music, then Ice Earth is the band for you. And I'd recommend this album anyone. If you want to start your collection with the debut, that'd be awesome. Well, this is that's about all I have for you today. So this is Wild Bill signing out of Wild Bill's Media and the Arts podcast. Take it easy and have a blessed day. Thank you.